So things aren't looking good for Ukraine. They're losing men, they're struggling to raise money, and now they might even need to give up ground. We know that economics and war they're closely tied together. Once the money stops, sooner or later you won't be able to fight on. Ukraine's dollar reserves are starting to drain away fast. They are struggling for cash even as Russia is back to a large and rising current account surplus. Because of rising oil revenues and the skirting of Western sanctions, Russia is in no danger of going broke anytime soon. Their current account surplus in November is still rising, hitting over $12 billion. That's well above pre-war levels, and it's simple to understand why. Russia is selling a real commodity that the world needs. Without oil, modern civilization will simply collapse. It is impossible to cut away all of Russian commodities from the world without causing a big inflation crisis. The West is finally starting to realize that, and we are seeing a big shift in sentiment. People are starting to ask the difficult question of if Russia might actually win. This time is Ukraine's biggest donor that's having second thoughts. The United States is having doubts about funding this war forever, and they are now thinking out loud. A Republican senator is suggesting that Ukraine might have to cede land to Russia to end the war, and he's asking a very direct and fundamental question about giving Ukraine additional aid. What would $61 billion more accomplish that 100 billion hasn't? In other words, he believes it's a complete waste of money that won't produce any new results. This is a shocking shift in sentiment that shows aid to Ukraine won't last forever. Even if Biden gets his $100 billion approved, this might be the last tranche of money, the final contribution to the war effort before America throws in the towel. It's like in those Rocky movies but in reverse. You can take only so many body blows from Drago before enough is enough, and Zelensky kinda knows that the end might be coming. Zelensky is in Washington to rally US in crucial week for alliance. This is a last-ditch effort to rally Biden, the Republicans, and even the IMF to get the money flowing. He is pulling out all the stops to get his funding. Listen to this. If there's anyone inspired by unresolved issues on Capitol Hill, it's just Putin and his sick clique. When the free world hesitates, that's when dictatorships celebrate. It's the classic democracy versus autocracy argument, right? That usually works in the past. It's right out of the usual playbook. But something has fundamentally changed in the United States today. Money is going to run out by the end of December, but there isn't any sense of urgency to pass the 60 billion funding for Ukraine. The House Speaker isn't budging and there's no vote by Congress coming. Why is there a sudden shift in sentiment? According to the Pew Research Center, almost half of Republicans say that the United States is giving too much aid to Ukraine. This puts the Democrats, ironically, as the bigger war hawks today. But what's really interesting is the consensus on both sides that Russia is less of a major threat to American interests today. In 2022, 50% of US adults see Russia's move into Ukraine as a major threat to American interests. Well, that has dropped down to only 33%, with the Republicans polling only 27%. This shows how much the threat level has dropped, which directly affects the urgency for additional funding. Overall, Americans aren't happy with the way Biden has responded to the Ukraine war. In total, 41% disapprove of how things were handled, while only 39% approved. Disapproval is rising, and we must understand how important political support is. It was a big factor that caused America to pull out of the Vietnam War. People were sick and tired of the conflict. Back then, it was US troops in direct battle with the Viet Cong, but now it's US money that's being funneled into a black hole. There's a reason why Zelensky is going hard on the US for money, saying a halt in aid will benefit dictatorships. But can America keep giving Ukraine money forever? It's unlikely because the financial mess is getting from bad to worse. Over $100 billion have been committed so far. And when America gives Ukraine money, it's borrowed from the real economy, which causes a big problem. You are simultaneously pushing up borrowing costs in your domestic economy while draining away money from the system. This pushes America closer towards a potential recession. If we look at America's latest debt auction, it's another horrible event. The US Treasury recently sold $37 billion worth of 10-year bonds, and the auction came back with a D plus grade as yields were pushed up slightly to nearly 4.3%. Demand from international buyers was less than the 6 months average as well. Even the 3-year auction of $50 billion of bonds also went badly. Demand for US treasuries is still low because buyers are afraid of America's endless deficit spending. The supply of US treasuries flooding the market is still a very big problem. If America continues to fund Ukraine, This will force Janet Yellen to sell even more debt. The pushback we are seeing in America is both political and financial as well. This is a deadly combination that could freeze funding well into 2024. We must factor in the Middle East crisis as well. If America has to choose between Israel and Ukraine, they will likely choose to support Netanyahu over Zelensky. America is starting to hesitate today. They are wondering if they can really collapse the Russian economy first. This has always been a battle of financial attrition. Russia's goal is to outlast the West. America's goal is to bankrupt Putin. It's quite simple here, but that doesn't seem to be working. The West has been trying every trick in the book to choke away Russian revenues, especially from oil and gas. They've thrown sanctions and oil price caps on Russian exports, but 18 months later, we can kind of say it has failed. Looking at the flow of Russian crude exports, there are two big conclusions we can effectively come to. Russia has diverted their oil supply to Asia. Europe's volume in rate has decreased from over 50% of Russia's exports pre-war to near zero today. However, that slack has been picked up by China and India. What Europe doesn't want is now flowing to them. Discounted Russian oil for China and India while the EU is paying more. But notice something really interesting as well. The overall volume of Russia's crude exports has not changed. From January 2022 to December this year, the overall levels are still around 85 to 90 million barrels a day. Oil is still flowing into the economy because Putin has been one step ahead of the West. The G7 oil ban was supposed to make it hard for Russia to export to their traditional buyers, Europe. But now the script has been flipped. And if we analyze the Russian oil price cap, that has also largely failed. The whole point of that was to prevent Putin from selling oil above $60, right? So even if crude oil flies to $100 a barrel, Russia can only sell below $60. However, reality is telling us something quite different. Moscow is still benefiting from higher crude oil prices. Earlier in June, OPEC Plus decided to cut oil production aggressively. Russia and Saudi Arabia withheld millions of barrels a day from the global markets, and that caused oil prices to soar. Now, if the price caps really worked, Russia's revenues should stay relatively flat, but we can see this big rebound up in oil revenues as the crude price rose. This is undeniable evidence that oil is being sold well above the $60 price cap. It is impossible to fully sanction away such a critical commodity from the world. And why is this happening? Well, because Russia is relying less and less on G7 insured ships. They now have a fleet of shadow vessels willing to transport Russian crude to buyers for a profit. In April 2022, around 80% of ships transporting Russian crude were under G7 vessels. 18 months later, things are very different. Less than 30% of vessels are under the influence of the G7. This means the majority of Russian cargo can be sold above the price cap if crude goes above $60. And this shadow fleet is going to keep growing and growing until it hits 80% or even 90%. So if you're the West, you're losing your mind. The sanctions aren't working, and as time goes by, it's getting less and less effective. Russia can match every dollar the West throws at them with their own revenues. It's important to understand why Russia is acting so confident today. Just a few days back, Putin told the world that his economy is winning, that economic isolation from the West is helping Russia to become a new growth center while the West is falling behind. Where is this confidence coming from? It's because Russia isn't as isolated as we all think. In fact, they are rebuilding relations with countries that matter to their economy, especially those in the Middle East. Putin recently made a rare trip to the Persian Gulf to meet up with Saudi Arabia and the UAE. This is amidst the Ukraine conflict and the Israel war. Now, the agenda was, of course, about oil and gas. I mean, just look at this handshake between Putin and MBS. Does this look like Russia has lost or won the Middle East? And I'll play it again. The body language is just so obvious here. This doesn't exactly look like global isolation at all. Putin and the prince, they're enjoying their time together. What's clear is that Russia and Saudi Arabia will be working together to keep oil prices high. So Russian revenues aren't going to collapse as long as OPEC Plus keeps working together. I think it's really telling that even Western media themselves are speculating that Russia might actually win. It's as if all the confidence has left the room. Here's a shocking piece from the Telegraph, a British news outlet. Putin's Russia is closing in on a devastating victory. Kiev's counteroffensive has ended in failure. This could be NATO's Suez moment. According to the piece, Putin needs only to hang on for another 12 months. But even if Donald Trump is not elected, Republican congressmen have turned against the war. And if you add on Senator Vance suggesting that Ukraine needs to cede land to Russia, you have a collapse in war sentiment. What's in America's best interest is to accept Ukraine is going to have to cede some territory to the Russians, and we need to bring this war to a close. If he's saying it aloud now, just imagine the conversations happening behind closed doors, right? So we are slowly moving towards a resolution that will likely shock the entire Western world. But focus back on the financial aspect. America can't fund Ukraine forever. The debt burden of the United States is growing exponentially. There will come a point in time where it's physically impossible to borrow any more money. US interest payments have doubled from $1 billion a day to nearly $2 billion in 2023. This is the consequence of borrowing more money to fund deficit spending as interest rates go higher and higher. More war spending for Ukraine is only going to push the debt burden even further. The interest payments will balloon out of control, especially when Yellen has to borrow at 4 to 5% rates today. If we look at the interest payments versus the percentage of tax receipts, things are getting out of control. We are nearly at 36%. That means for every $100 in taxes the government collects, $36 goes off to pay off the interest on the national debt. This is unsustainable, and if spending continues, we could be back to the levels in the 1970s, in the 1980s. Then things won't be pretty. I think Congress is finally realizing this, that a disaster is coming if spending isn't reined in. But before you think the war is over, it isn't over yet. The IMF has approved a 900 million payout for Ukraine. This is part of the 15 billion approved earlier in March, so the World Fund could be drained further and further to keep Ukraine afloat. This is still a war of financial attrition. But if the United States really drops support, it's just a matter of time before the rest of the world pulls back as well. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will America pull funding away? And can Russia really outlast the West? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.